Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Dead Man Walking podcast. I'm your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, which is actually what happened to me, and that's how I got the name Repeatedly Dead Fred. So today I'm very happy to have Stacy and Marcus Noggle. They are, I don't know, I guess transformation experts. Is that the best way to describe you?
Yeah, that's one way.
Sounds great.
High performance health consultants, but transformation is always part of the process.
Okay. And so we're here to talk about transformation in health, and I guess mindset always goes with that. So, guys, welcome. Not guys, guys and girl, guys and woman. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Well, we're very happy to be live with you here today, especially given your nomer. And so, thank you for having us.
My pleasure. So, do you want to start off with telling the audience how you got on this journey? People like origin stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marcus and I have been on this journey our whole lives. I think we were just born for this.
Hmm.
We always, well, I'll tell my story first. Always wanted to excel. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to
Hmm.
experience, find my edges, what I was capable of. And in order to do that, I realized that I needed to feel my best. I needed to wake up feeling enthusiastic and ready to go on to my day and have that level of zest for life and the
Hmm.
capacity, the physical, mental, emotional capacity to fulfill that in order to do what I really wanted to do in life. And so that started so young.
Hmm.
I remember being 4. It's like, I'm going to learn how to read this book.
Hmm.
So I was just determined. And then as I went through school, I got very interested in health and performance. And
That's very interesting to me because so many people don't make that connection to being at your best physically to being at your best in general. And for you to clue into that at such a young age is quite a gift.
well, I love feeling great. And I love it when the people that I know feel great as well. And so it became a lifelong pursuit of searching for, what is that formula? And
Mhm.
discovering, of course, there is no formula that fits everybody,
Right,
but there are certain basic tenets of well-being that we can all learn and benefit from. And
for sure.
so I studied biology in college and then went on to get a master's in East Asian medicine and have had a private practice for over 30 years and work with Marcus together in our business, specifically specializing in type 2 diabetes reversal and weight loss for peak performance. Because there's so much more than number. A blood sugar number doesn't mean you're healthy, and absence of disease doesn't mean you're healthy. What means you're healthy is that you feel confident and capable in your ability to fulfill your purpose, pursue your passions, excel in your profession. So that's what we aspire to create for people.
So you've been doing this for 30 years and you look like you're at most 37. So
Mid 50s.
so you're doing something right.
I hope
Let's
so.
let's flip to Marcus. Marcus, what's going on with you?
Well, it's always fun to try to distill 56 years into a few bullet points, right?
Hmm.
I'm a molecular biologist by training from MIT, and I think I was headed on a pre-med course. In my life, I've always been interested in the human body. I was a multi-sport athlete all through high school and actually through college as well. Um, and I worked in the biotech industry in New York City and London and San Francisco in the early 90s, which, there were viable products on the market. And we worked for suppliers to the medical industry where be they biotherapeutics or new assay techniques or, really kind of on the cutting edge of biology integrating itself into medicine and changing from a chemical pill-based situation into a biology protein-based approach. And so that was one decade of my life. I kind of leveraged that at some point. I'm not a career guy. I like to, like Stacy said, test my edges, but not only my intellectual edges, but my physical edges as well. And so I became a firefighter, EMT, high angle rope rescue
Okay.
technician, and was a firefighter for about 7 years. And I worked in the pre-hospital environment. We lived on a very small island. And so we had a lot of patient contact, a lot of time sitting with patients for 2 and 3 hours that might be in cardiac arrest before a helicopter or a straight wing plane could come into the island, because there's oftentimes inclement weather. And so that was a very enlightening look at health and well-being overall. In between that time too, I spent some time with the team at Genentech, a biotech company, and we, as a team, took a drug for heart attack for MI through the FDA for acute ischemic stroke, and it was the first drug that was ever approved for acute ischemic stroke. And so that was an interesting look, kind of at the political side, I'll say, as well as the scientific side too, for what kind of endpoints you want to achieve and what kind of efficacy of safety you need to demonstrate in order to have a viable product that actually can help people. So, as a backdrop to all of that, we are avid backcountry campers. I've summited Kilimanjaro. I've dived around the world for thousands of scuba dives, and really tried to see how my body would perform at 20,000 feet and how my body performs at 150 feet below the ocean. And when I was about 20, well, actually, when I was in college, I started to experiment with my diet to see how it affected me. So I cut out processed red meat for a while just to see what that would do, and didn't kill me. And in fact, I might have felt a little bit better, and I might have had a little bit more energy. And, we're talking in the mid 80s right now. So, vegetarianism and veganism and plant-based diets and some of these types of things weren't talked about. Well, they weren't talked about as much, and they certainly weren't talked about in the same way that we're talking about them now. And we didn't know as much as we know 40 years later. And so about 35 years ago for me, I adopted a fully plant-based diet, and I've eaten it. I haven't looked back. It's something that's worked extremely well for me from an energy perspective. It's provided everything that I need. It's kept me incredibly healthy. Sometimes I wish I had a story that I've overcome cancer, or I have had some hardship that has affected me in my diet, or my exploration has taken me past that, and I've learned something from going through that negativity. But the fact of the matter is, I don't have that story. I've always felt great. My body's always served me well. I've never been restricted from anything that I've wanted to do. And like the scientists that we are, having conducted this experiment on myself, well, we've got 4 kids. We've got 2 daughters, one that's 34 and one that's 23, that are adult and grown and doing their things. But we also have a 13-year-old boy and a 9-year-old boy that live here with us in Cuenca, Ecuador, at about 9,000 feet in the Andes Mountains. And they have eaten a plant-based diet since conception. And so it's been very interesting to not only track my 35 years of kind of dietary exploration, but also to do it with them. And they're super intelligent, highly energized, in the 95th percentile for height and weight. They're really super healthy, fun kids. And so it's been fun to see a proof of concept, if you will, not only within ourselves, but also to see it within our kids. And we once a year, go out and get our blood drawn and look at all the different things in our blood to make sure that, we're kind of doing the right thing and we're hitting the endpoints that we want to hit. And, it's been a really positive reinforcement to see that the lifestyle and diet choices that we've made have served us all as a family so well. And it's, been a blessing to share that with people now as well.
It's very interesting to me that you say you went off processed red meat. And, even 30 years ago, the processed red meat was not nearly as toxic as it is now. Like, we're very good at developing, processing chemicals and things like that. So I think if somebody switched from that type of diet today to vegan, it would be a more dramatic switch for them, because their body's got all this extra stuff in it. Its toxic load is just, ramped up to the hilt.
It's toxic load for sure. And I almost sometimes feel like it's a secret, because I don't see it spread widely around the media, and certainly not within the United States. But the World Health Organization what year are we in now? 1990, 2024. It must have been 6 years ago now, maybe 7. I'm sure you can look it up on the internet easily. But, they declared processed red meat a category 1 carcinogen. It's in the same category as probabilistically causing cancer as cigarettes. And so, that's a very interesting thing that if you took an average person off the street in the United States and said, did you know that red meat has the same probability as causing cancer as smoking cigarettes does? And there's data that the World Health Organization has that supports this. I think if you pick 10 people off the street, 9 people would have never heard that before. Because when you come down to the standard American diet, which is pretty sad, as the acronym, says, I think that, we've traveled the world far and wide to 50 or 60 countries. And when you think about cuisines and what defines a cuisine, more often than not, when people talk about the standard American diet that are not American, they consider it to be 4th of July, hot dogs and hamburgers and watermelon and potato salad. And when you look at the protein sources of that, they are proven as cancer-causing agents. So we are not educated as a population much on nutrition, and there's so much information about any topic, but nutrition in particular, and misinformation as well, that it's really hard to weigh to wade your way through it. And there's nothing, I think, more demonstrative than if you look at the food pyramid that we were probably taught, in 7th grade health, back in the 1970s. It's almost inverted. It's inverted again. The triangle shape has changed. All the different layers have changed. It's very hard to figure out what the right thing to do is with your diet.
Yeah, and the two of you have a scientific background, and you can read studies more easily than the average person. But even referencing the World Health Organization, the information that went back and forth over this recent pandemic, I don't know if you heard about it, like nobody knows what to believe anymore.
Absolutely.
The food pyramid is crazy. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, Ivor Cummings, who runs I think it's called the Fat Emperor podcast. He had a couple of doctors who tried to it's a doctor and his wife. He was an orthopedic surgeon and tried to get his patients off sugar because he was tired of amputating their limbs from diabetes. And he got censored.
Wow.
It's like the craziest story. If you want to hear it, it's probably like his 20th podcast or something like that. And they went into the tale that our food pyramids were basically evolved from the Seventh-day Adventists. They invented dietitians, and according to them, the impetus for getting off meat and going full grain was because they were all around the area where Kellogg's and Post and all those cereal companies were.
Interesting.
And meat was the primary driver of masturbation, which was evil. So they had to get you off meat.
I've not heard that story, but I do know that in terms of the blue zones in the world, that Loma Linda, California remains a blue zone, which means they are the healthiest, longest lived population on the planet, while other blue zones have faded away from that standing due to the incorporation of modern dietary strategies influenced by the West. So there's something that's been working for the people in Loma Linda, California, of which many are Seventh-day Adventists. So there's, as we started the conversation, there's no one diet fits everybody. Right. And there's food as medicine, where you may go to a more extreme culinary prescription for a period of time to accomplish a particular result. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good to do all of the time. So right. We do appreciate the blue zones and their studies, and are always curious to learn more, research more. We read studies every day. There's not a day that I'm not on PubMed reading.
You're such nerds.
Or, you bring up the point that there are so many studies, and you can take one data point and you can look at it from two different perspectives that almost almost seem, polar opposites. And
Hmm.
I think that sometimes when you look at the headlines, we kind of screen the New York Times and the USA Today because it's the most widely read newspaper in the US. We look at the BBC and Al Jazeera, and we try to, get an understanding of what's kind of going on in the world, mostly through the perspective of the lens of health and wellness and lifestyle. And, you catch a headline every now and again that seems inflammatory in some way, whether it's positive or
Hmm.
negative. And you read that article and it doesn't really contain much. It contains some fluff, but it might have a hyperlink, that then takes you to the scientific study. And you found out that the conclusion that they're drawing and they're now sharing with millions of people was studied in 24 rats in a laboratory over like 30 days. Well,
Hmm.
that may mean something for us and likely, and it may not, but it certainly needs to be researched further before anybody should be talking about it. Versus a meta-analysis that goes out and takes 3 or 4 or 5 studies and looks at hundreds of thousands of people over a 5 or 10 year period and draws a conclusion. And, that's more likely to be true, right? And so you look at the China study that, was conducted, decades ago now, and followed hundreds of thousands of people and, looked for what the highest quality, best diet was for quality of life. And, it's something akin to a plant-based diet, right? When you look at some of the larger studies. And so taking the information and taking the scientists and taking it within the context of the whole to understand, is this a building block that we're going to continue to study to see if this is something that really might be true? Or is this something that's been proven time and time again, over lots of people and lots of time? And those things are they're not reasonably easy to figure out because you have to do a data search, but they're pretty straightforward. And I think if you took, again, that same person off the street and said, did you know about the World Health Organization's classification of highly processed red meat? And you said to them, well, this study says this, with 10,000 people, and this study says this with 24 people in rats, which do you think has more validity? I think they'll get that one right, but nobody's really willing to take those extra steps, to kind of vet the information that they're reading. And so it takes a lot of time to do that. And it's something that we like to do. And, it's something that really provides a foundation for us to understand the context of what does health mean right now and what are the recommendations for optimal health. And how are those changing over time? Because, things are being studied more and more and more every day, whether it's the length of your telomere and how that, affects your aging, or, artificial pancreases. There's all kinds of things that are out there. And, we're very curious people by nature. So it's a fun part of our relationship that we get to share together. And it's a real part of the value we hope that we add to people by you not having to go out and vet all this information, because we like to do it for you.
Yeah, it's interesting that, in the early 70s, health meant that you made it to your pension and maybe a couple of years past that, right? You could actually keep your job till you were 65, and then, then you stopped working, did nothing, and then you were dead at 68. And
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
health. And there was nothing about quality life and, what you could do and how you aged cognitively, and things like that. So, you were talking about the blue zones a bit, and I'm trying to remember the scientist who was speaking about it. He said the blue zones that decreased in lifespan were infiltrated by vegetable oils. And that's what turned the tide for them. Because if you don't know in the audience, vegetable oils are pretty toxic. And it might have been Tim Spector. I'm not sure. Sorry if it wasn't you, Tim, but that's what
Yeah.
I remember hearing or reading.
I think that that's one possible factor, one factor for sure. But I think if you look at if
Causality,
you look at
correlation.
if you look at where the blue zones are, Okinawa, Japan, Ikaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. If you look at Okinawa and Japan, for example, there's been nuclear disasters that have happened in
Mhm.
that area. So, what kind of chemical substances are in your food now, from the air, from the water, from all the other things we're putting in the Pacific Ocean in particular right now? Some of these things are not very well studied at all. And so,
Mhm.
like we always say life is multifactorial, right? So it's usually not one specific thing that's the causal agent or the causal factor that's creating the end situation. It's a much more tangled web that we live in. And so I think, when you look at the blue zones, the places where people have regularly lived over 100 years of age in a healthy way, Dan Buettner in a study that was on the Netflix, when he went out and looked at those 5 places and he looked at the 5 factors in each of those 5 places, and he came up with his 25 kind of key success factors, if you will, to healthy living. The number one overall factor that he came up with that was the most important factor was that people, these are my words, but had a reason to get.
Oh, we have stalled.
Creating a life with other people. Well, that's not even diet related. All the rest of them, most of the rest of them are diet related. But that's a very interesting to think back to your point. I think about, well, what is retirement? Am I ever going to retire? Where I'm going to stop doing the thing that in theory I chose that I love to do, and then what? Be retired? And, I've looked at people that are near and dear to me in my life that are elders now that are, 80 plus years of age. And their reason to get up in the morning has diminished, and their health has diminished too. And so is it that their diet is not supporting them? Is it that they're not exercising enough? Is it that that society has changed so much they feel disconnected from things that used to be meaningful to them 50 and 60 and 70 years ago? Do they not have a reason to get up in the morning? It's a complicated situation. And so while we love to look at the physical body because oftentimes data is robust, and it's reasonably binary. It's either a yes or no, or it's more black and white. But then when you get emotions and you get motivation and you get willpower and you get some of the social emotional factors that we need to pay attention to, along with the mental and intellectual drive that goes behind all of that, it's complicated to understand the human body. We're complicated creatures.
Oh, for sure. And as you alluded to before, we're all an experiment of one. And the experiment we are this month might be a totally different experiment than we are next month.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. And that's why programs who say, do this, it's the way, are potentially dangerous, because that may not be your way for the rest of your life. We grow, we change, we have different health challenges, we have different hormonal realities at different ages. Different ability to digest protein or produce enzymes. And it's important that we are flexible. There is a framework, and it's a flexible framework for health. And it's important that we can acknowledge that, and that we are willing and open to make those changes as the changes in our own being or our family or our society come along.
When I was moderating in Jin's intermittent fasting groups, one of the questions we hated the most, it was actually a two-part question. What's everybody's eating window, and how fast are you losing? Because it can't be the same. It just can't.
Right.
And let's make it a competition too, which it's not really that either, right? I mean, we're competing against what our best self is versus where we are right now, right? It's not where somebody else is too, which can, really be a game changer in a non-positive way when you're comparing yourself to, other people's experiences or studies, which don't necessarily fit one size for everybody.
And it's just, I just saw such spectacular results from so many people. As I mentioned to you before, we had 350,000 people in the group, and so many conditions were reversed. My insulin, my diabetes, type 2 diabetes, was reversed. And the doctors say, no, you can't do that. And even now, 6 years, 7 years later, when my numbers have been totally normal, they still call me diabetic. They won't take that off my chart. But if you get cured from cancer, they don't keep your cancerous on your charts. They just refuse to get rid of it.
Yeah.
The current belief in the medical system is that there is no cure for diabetes. You can go into remission, but because you have had high blood sugar in the past, it's caused changes that make you more likely to develop it again in the future. So they will call it a remission, but they will not call it a cure.
Yeah, I'm pretty much cured. I'm pretty sure.
That's great.
That's great.
That's so wonderful. And intermittent fasting is something that we share with our clients as well, because there's so much to be gained from so many different perspectives. And there are risks. You know, we have had people come to us and ask questions, go, okay, I eat in a 4-hour window now. And I say, well, what do you eat? Oh, and there are like 4 things that they eat. And there's no way they're getting all of their nutrient needs met with a very limited variety of food. And so while the window can be small for a period of time, it's still important that people look at, are they getting all of their macro, micro, and phytonutrient needs met? And are they using food as medicine? Is it the right thing for their bodies and their constitution and their goals for that time period? And that's where we find that people get confused. They are trying something that they, you know, read about in some magazine while they were getting their hair done or things like that. But there's great science around it, and being able to do it in a smart way so that you can have sustainable results like you have. And you know, have those 7-8 years later is remarkable and a testament to your awareness of doing the right thing for your body.
I think one of the challenges for people is that, well, in Gin System, we don't have people tracking their foods. We don't tell them what to eat. You're supposed to eat what makes you feel good. But the average person is so busy, especially if they have families, that their menu becomes very limited, becomes so predictable, and they can't include the variety of things that would be beneficial to them. So, you know, Monday's always meatloaf, Tuesday's always, you know, tuna casserole or whatever. So it's really hard for people in this environment to experiment and keep track of things.
Absolutely.
We talk about that a lot. You know, life has gotten, the pace of life seems like it's increased so dramatically from, you know, for us, the 70s and the 80s. And, you know, people are always looking to buy time. We consider time to be a financial commodity. We spend time with people instead of enjoy time with people. And we're always, you know, we're always looking to try and find time because we need more time for the things that we think we want to do. And I think that one of the most common places that we pull that time from is food acquisition, food preparation, food sharing. And if you look at the statistics again, you know, of just sitting down and having a meal together, it doesn't matter what the meal is, but, you know, just sitting down and having time as a family unit together, if you're part of a family unit, increases the likelihood that your child is going to do well in school, that they might go to college, if that's something that's important, that they'll be successful, that they're going to be socially and emotionally well adjusted. You know, the parameters that increase positively just from sitting down at one table together, focused on each other around a meal is amazing. And then if you figure out and talk about, okay, what are we eating? And then what is the broad range of what we've eaten over the course of a week? You know, an awful lot of people are trying to find half an hour, an hour and a half out of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they're left with fast food in the microwave, you know, to kind of make up for it. Well, you know, that's not, for a lot of people, not doing it in a right way. That's not a sustainable way of bringing yourself energy. And at some point, you know, health overall too, you are going to develop some conditions over time that are going to be the antithesis of why you tried to find that time in the first place. So when we work with our clients, that's a lot of what we look at is people get in food ruts. They're not efficiently looking at how they feed themselves and how they create life from a lifestyle perspective. And, you know, there's all kinds of little hacks, the kind of trendy word right now, but there's all kinds of little key success factors and tips that, you know, if you start to implement these and they become part of your habitual process and then part of your routine and a part of your character, you can get yourself back to, you know, a healthy way of living reasonably quickly. It's like the natural environment. Here in Yellowstone National Park, when they reintroduced the gray wolf, they culled the elk population 40,000 down to 5 or 10 in a 10-year time period. And beavers came back, and native birds came back, and native bush came back that they hadn't seen before, just in 10 years, which is like a blink of an eye. And the human body is capable of that type of change and transformation as well, if you choose to do the right things over time.
So I had to go to the local mall the other day. You know, they've all got food courts,
Yeah.
and I was fascinated walking through the tables area that so many people were sitting alone. And granted, they were mostly seniors.
On
And
their
what a
phone.
different the seniors weren't on their phones so much. A lot of, but it's just like, just look over and say, mind if I sit with you? Like that
Yeah.
would add such a quality of life experience to all these people. And they're just all alone and not having that communal meal that you were talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that about dining in Western Europe. You know, if there's any seats available in the restaurant, they're yours. People invite you to come over, sit down, you meet some interesting people, you might make some new friends. You know, in the United States, if there's a half a table open, you just sit outside and wait in line till the whole table's available.
Hmm. I think that used to be the Club Med model, right? Like everybody, you didn't get to reserve your spots for whoever in their restaurants. Whatever, wherever they sat you, you were sitting with somebody new every night, which
Yeah,
is
again, we focus on health, and we focus on the physical body as transformation for everything else that happens inside, for lack of a better way to say it. But again, I keep going back to the blue study, and I think about, my grandmother worked 40 hours a week up until she was in the hospital for 5 days and died when she was in her mid 80s. And so she was an amazing woman, and 10 years when she was probably in her late 70s and still working 40 hours a week and super healthy and never had a cavity in her teeth and all the rest of it. I was like, Grandma, what do you think? What are the three key success factors, or what are the key success factors in your life if you think about your life well lived, so healthy for so long? She grew up on a dairy farm when she was young in Western Pennsylvania. What would you say? And she thought for a couple, 3 minutes, and she said, I think you have to have a reason to get up in the morning. That was number one. And then she sat, maybe a couple, 3 more minutes, and was thinking. And she said, I think you need to get good sleep. And then she said, I think you need to eat right. And that was it. It was just that simple. We spend a lot of time, in the minutia of scientific studies, but we love to lump and clump too and come up with, what are the 2 or 3 nuggets that you should remember or that you should try to implement in your life. And I love Michael Pollan from the Omnivore's Dilemma in his work. And he summarized it, I think, as succinctly in 7 words as you possibly can. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And if you follow those 3 nuggets, your mitigation and prevention of disease is increased. Your ability to cure disease is increased. Your carbon footprint, if you want to bring in the whole, natural side of this as well, is decreased. So with every meal, not only are you helping your personal health, but you're helping planetary health as well. Your longevity, but not just your longevity, because who wants to live 90 years with the last 10 or 15 in a nursing home while you're pushing your walker around and eating probably crappy food, right? I mean, you want a high quality of life. You want to be engaged and active in your 80s and your 90s. And so not only your longevity, but your quality of life in the later years of life is increased by just those 7 words. And if you look at people in the United States, 97% of people don't eat enough fiber, 80% of people don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. And nobody's saying, take all of this thing out of your, don't eat any meat at all, but if you just take some small steps towards health, towards building a positive feedback loop, towards feeling better, gaining more energy, gaining, you're more available for people in a positive way when you feel better. Just starting to take some of those steps and then taking those steps consistently, you can build a new foundation, and you can do it pretty quickly. There are spiritual disciplines that say every 7 years, your entire body is brand new. All of your cells have died off, and all of your cells biologically have been replaced. Well, think about that. I'm a brand new person every 7 years. That's, again, it's, you can do a lot in 7 years, but 7 years also is pretty fast, right? That you can make some very deep transformational change in your being.
Sure. I want you to hold that thought because Zoom's about to kick me off. So I'm going to make a natural break here for part one. And if you could just log in again, and we'll continue with part two.
Thank you, Fred.
I'm finding this fascinating. So see you in a minute.
Thank you.
And we're back with Stacy and Marcus Noggle, and we're talking about transformation and lifestyle and mindset and all those good things that improve our quality of life. And as we ended part one, Marcus was just talking about the 7 year transformation that your body, every cell in your body, it goes through every 7 years. And not all the cells change over at the same rate. Like red blood cells are roughly 90 days, and your taste buds are 2 weeks. Like all your taste buds turn over every 2 weeks. And that's one of the fascinating things we found in intermittent fasting is how quickly people realized they didn't like the taste of things they had liked previously. And I know that happened to me. So I used to really like Twizzlers, the licorice thing. And now they just taste like blobs of wax. I can't eat them.
Yeah.
I mean, if I forced myself, I could, but you know, so it's just amazing what the body can do if we let it.
Yeah, yeah, which absolutely brings us to the point of talking about a metaphor of a tree. You know, there are roots, there's a trunk, and there are branches. And the roots are where we're acquiring energy. You know, are we getting all the nutrients we need? Are we getting the social interactions that we need? Is our mindset right? Are we getting sleep? This is where we're soaking up all of the things that nourish us. And then it has to go through the trunk. This is our communication highway, go through the trunk into the branches of our current life expression. And in East Asian medicine, they talk about, you know, is it root or is it branch that you're treating? Because it's so important. And this is where a lot of Western medicine misses out, is they don't focus on nourishing the roots of who we are, making sure that our, in Chinese medicine, they call it the righteous qi, you know, the energy of good health and vitality. And instead they go and they prune the branches where the disease is. So sometimes you have to prune the branches. You know, if you're a gardener and there's some disease, you've got to pinch that part off. But if you're not looking at why did that disease happen? Do I need, have I done something wrong with the soil? Is it getting enough light? Have we given it too much water? Then you're just going to keep cutting off the disease. And it's so important in health that we focus on building that core of health. And then the part that is still not that common, even in alternative or complementary medicine, is the trunk, because that's the communication. And in the human body, we're talking about how intermittent fasting changed your taste buds. Well, a lot of that has to do with your gut biome changing. You have different bacteria in your gut, which, you know, whose DNA outnumber yours practically 10 to 1. And when they change, they give you different cravings. They affect your neurotransmitters differently. They affect everything in our bodies. And that science is relatively new, and we are still learning so much about it. But the communication pathways in the body and how our different parts and our different systems and mechanisms communicate with one another and influence one another is vitally important in developing and sustaining good health. And it's often overlooked.
Yeah. And if you're high in processed foods, your gut biome is going to be predominantly bad bacteria and causing all that inflammation and leaky gut and all that stuff. And when you get into those stages, it really affects how much serotonin your body can make, because most of it is made in your digestive tract. And, you know, it just puts us all in a fog. It really does.
Yeah.
You know, it's something we pay close attention to because, you know, as we said earlier on, we've eaten a plant-based diet for 35 years. And so, well, you can say I've eaten a vegan diet for 35 years. I don't necessarily call it that or consider myself to be a vegan in that way. But when you look at the evolution of food, over the last 35 years. I can remember when I was in a business meeting and, we were getting served dinner, we were getting served lunch, and I was always hopeful that there was a salad with a non-dairy based salad dressing, oil and vinegar, and then maybe some nuts, that was going to be the thing that sustained me through the 8 or 9 or 10 or 15-hour business meeting, because there wasn't really any consciousness around, oh my God, if you don't eat meat, we need to provide something else for people that don't eat meat. And there never were lentils, or there never were, black beans, or, any of these types of things. But I look now at all the options that people have who consider themselves, a vegan or somebody who's trying to adopt or advocate a plant-based diet. And there's so many highly processed alt proteins out there, many of which smell like cat food to me. I mean, we seldom eat, veggie burgers that we haven't made ourselves, or, and occasionally we'll be out and about someplace and we need to get a meal. And, that's the option that we have, is a veggie burger or some such thing. But, a lot of people think that they can swap out, vegan yogurt for Greek dairy-based yogurt, and that they're going to have a one-for-one nutritional swap. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And then I can take out my hamburgers and my hot dogs, and I can, implement said burger, Beyond Burger, whatever else it might be. They have different nutritional profiles. And there are a lot of people, we, have been termed junk food vegans, and I tend to agree with it, who think that they can go out and one-for-one swap out the thing that they used to eat with some new, extremely highly processed plant-based food, and that they're going to have better results. Well, they might. I mean, because we've not studied highly processed plant-based foods or all proteins, over 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, and what effects those have on the human body. And so scientifically we would have to say, we don't really know, because we don't. Those studies just simply don't exist. And
aren't
I do think
Oreos vegan?
Exactly. Oreos and Coca-Cola and French fries are all vegan foods that you can eat. And people mistakenly think that a plant-based diet is healthy.
Yeah.
But a plant-based diet is not necessarily healthy. You still have to make the right choices, no matter what diet you choose.
10 or 15 years ago, there was a couple that, they had 1 or 2 kids. I can't remember the story, and I'm sure you could Google it pretty fast. But they were basically feeding the kids Doritos, I think, was the primary thing, and, soda and a few other things, as a vegan diet. And they got prosecuted, they got arrested, and they were prosecuted for child neglect, basically, because they weren't feeding their vegan child the right food. And it made lots of news, because the whole vegan movement, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, has been controversial. For how they say you should be a vegan, for the reasons why you should be a vegan. And I think that it's saddening for us to have witnessed that, or have gone through it, and we're still kind of going through it, because I think that there's room in this world for more opinions. There's room in this world for different ways of doing things. And, I think for us, when we make recommendations with our clients, we are very conscious about not being a restrictive, strategic focus in any way. I think when you restrict yourself in these restrictive diets, some people hang on to them for quite some time. Some people don't. In a week or two, they're done. They need the things that they need to have back, and it's a radical change, and it's hard to keep it up. But what we try to do is, instead of saying don't do this, we mostly try to say, do this.
Do more of this.
And when you have a U.S. population, 80% of whom are not eating enough fruits and vegetables, well, we start easy. We just say, okay, let's focus on 5 fruits and vegetables for today. I don't care what else you eat, but we need the 5 fruits and vegetables. So what do you want to eat today? But what vegetables do you like? What fruits do you like? Have you ever tried this one before? Have you ever cooked this thing that way? It's reasonably quick and it tastes great. And so we really look at trying to take small steps towards doing the right positive things. And by doing that, you're starting to create a positive feedback cycle that hopefully, and usually, you start to feel better as you make some of these types of changes. And when you start to feel better and you start to continue to take those steps forward, what also happens is you break that negative feedback cycle
Mhm.
where, oh, geez, I'm depressed. I don't feel good about myself. Maybe I think I weigh too much, and I may or may not, but because I think I weigh too much, I'm going to go eat my pint of ice cream. And, that you kind of have these things that are social and emotional, but then also become physical, that are part of a negative feedback cycle, that once you start to care for yourself in a positive way, and so once you start to do a few positive things, and you feel better emotionally for taking care of yourself, and you think you're doing the right thing, and your body starts to react to, geez, I finally have some micronutrients and phytonutrients and things that I've never had before. And boy, my gut bacteria is getting really happy right now. And so that's got a whole nother exponential effect on my body that I haven't even considered. And so if we just start taking some steps sometimes in a different direction, we're not talking about not doing things. We're talking about doing the right thing. It's really a common sense health approach. And we're going back to the way that people did things, 100, 200, 300 years ago. Really isn't kind of all rocket science. And
Mhm.
so, the introduction of technology, not only for the way that we communicate and affect and communicate and interact with our loved ones and our friends, and the way that we conduct business, lots of people like to say technology is really bad for us. Well, technology is just a thing, and whether we use it in a good way or a bad way is kind of up to us. It's kind of like money. Lots
Mhm.
of people say money's bad, but it's just green energy, right?
Mhm.
And so the technology that we're applying to food may or may not be a good thing too. But in these long-term studies, it usually takes 10 or 15 years to figure out if that Beyond Burger that I'm eating, 5 or 6 times a week now, instead of my beef burger, is that going to cause cancer at the same rate or not the same rate? We don't really know, but it's definitely a highly processed food.
Mhm. I think people don't allow themselves or have the opportunity to see how these small cumulative steps affect them going down the road. And
Yeah.
it's just because they see the magazine in at the cashier, lose 48 pounds in 17 hours, and all that stuff, or they meet the wrong type of advocate. And
Yeah.
if you are an advocate for veganism or vegetarianism or whatever ism is on the spectrum, and you present yourself more as an ideologue or a zealot, people just can't buy into the message, no matter how good it is.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
For sure.
instead of meeting, people like the two of you who are very balanced and have a track record of helping people get to where they want and need to be, and you do it in a very positive frame. So I'm wondering, between the two of you, you probably have clients who are very successful, who have made the transformations that they wanted. You have a couple of stories, and I bet both of you have a different story for someone you've worked with who really made a significant transformation.
It's a good question.
Well, maybe I'll let, yeah, you can talk about her. I wanted to share a story about a woman that I had worked with for about 25 years. So
Mhm.
we met when she was in her 50s,
Mhm.
and then we moved. And so she's now in her 80s. Actually very close to 90.
Mhm.
She's traveling the world with her grandchildren. She's painting. She's doing all kinds of amazing things. And I learned so much from her. I don't know which one of us benefited more. And,
Mhm.
also we got to work with 3 generations of her family, her children and her grandchildren. So it was
Amazing.
remarkable to see this legacy of health that had come from this matriarch of the family. And she had said before, she said, I come here because I want you to help me stay upright and active for as long as possible. And I would say the key success factor for this woman is she chose good habits. She chose
Mhm.
ones that were evidence based, and she was so consistent.
Mhm.
She just put every day, she put these little drops into the bucket of her health and well being. she she did a lot of exercise too. She was very active, and at a phase in her 70s, she was going to some fitness classes, and she'd modify them for what she could do. But my goodness, she was there 3 days a week at least. And it was those consistent habits that have her now, 90, standing tall, looking gorgeous, and being very active and involved in her family. So this story is not one of dramatic transformation, but it's one of do the right thing, do it frequently. It didn't mean she didn't have a cocktail at 5 with her husband down by the water. It didn't mean that she didn't have chicken or that she didn't have a dessert sometimes. She wasn't that way. She was moderate, but she found something that made her feel great, and she did it every single day. And her health has been remarkable in the 30 years that I've known her.
So when this matriarch came to you, or you came to her, I'm not sure how this worked. What was she not so healthy, or was she starting from a position of a little bit of health?
No, she was into preventative health. So this is not a story of amazing transformation, but it's a story of when you do the right thing over time, it pays off.
Right.
And
the cumulative benefits.
yes, and the benefit that we have of working with people over decades is that you get to see what are those big patterns that work for people. It gets to be an in-depth study in a handful of people that you can go, what are the key success factors that they all have in common? One man used to come in and he had some health issues. He walked with a cane, but he would come to the office after he'd have his workout with his trainer, and he was about 85. And I'd say, how you doing today, Bob? And he'd say, I'm doing great, but I don't know how this young man got in this old body. And again, it was a story of, okay, well, you're in your 80s and you're still getting around and you're having fun and doing your thing. How did you do it? And, they came to me once every week or two for a treatment, whether it was acupuncture or diet lifestyle modification. But it's what they did all the hours of the week that made the difference. And so we can't ever put it on someone else to go, oh, I get acupuncture, so I'm doing the right thing for my health while I'm stopping at Burger King on the way home. It doesn't work that way. It's what we do in all the moments when no one's watching, when no one's telling us what to do or making a suggestion, that makes the difference for a long and healthy life that hopefully is disease-free because you have made good choices all along.
Marcus, do you have something along that line that you could share?
There's a man that popped into my mind, and so that's the direction I'll run. There's so many different things that we could share, but we're both certified yoga instructors, and yoga's been a part of my life that's been extremely meaningful and valuable for a long time. And I taught yoga for the longest time in California, and I taught in the correctional facility. So I taught in a main jail, and then they either got sentenced with felonies and went off to San Quentin, or they got, something of a lesser sentence and went to a medium or a minimum security incarceration period, which typically lasted for about 18 months. And there's one gentleman that I spent more or less his entire 18 months with him. I went into this jail system and kind of introduced a yoga program, and they were happy to have me come in there, the jail, in the correctional facility. And there's a wonderful program called Yoga Inside that provided free yoga mats to all the men that chose to get into my class. And it's a very interesting story. It's one of the most educational things I've ever done that taught me about me, from how you even position people in a yoga class to try to make it successful, to actually then taking a bunch of guys, many of whom came straight out of the weight room, huge, big guys, 100 pounds more than I weighed at that point. I was a 150-pound little yogi thing. And I'm still not too much bigger than that, but, and asking them to do poses and asanas and things that they couldn't do because they'd only ever focused on strength. They had never focused on flexibility and balance in kind of the tripod of the three. And it's amazing when you take somebody that does have physical awareness around strength, but then you introduce balance and flexibility as challenges, and it can be really hard. And it's a great metaphor for our society where power and strength have really pushed governments and countries and all kinds of entities forward. But really kind of what we need right now is balance and flexibility in addition to that strength, or with that strength administered in a proper way in order to be maximally healthy. So to make a longer story short, I taught him yoga 3 days a week in the medium security facility. He followed me into my class in the minimum security facility, and then they had a mandatory 30-day drug and alcohol recovery program. This gentleman was in there for doing and selling drugs. And he had ruined his life. He had lost his job. He had lost his relationship. He had a young daughter that he was estranged from and no connection with whatsoever for the time that he was incarcerated. And, to make a long story short, we really did a lot of yoga together. We talked about dietary modification, which he did undertake, and, in large part moved towards a much healthier diet, which is hard to do when you're incarcerated because the food there is not that great. But, moved towards a lot more plants. And then, in the step down, I went to some Alcoholics Anonymous meetings with him. I was not his sponsor in any way, but I went to support him. He rekindled his relationship with the mother of his child. He reestablished his relationship with his child. Unlike many people who have been incarcerated, he was able to get a productive job that had a living wage for him and to begin to provide not only for himself, but, for his family that he was rekindling with as well. And it all came around, developing and establishing a new relationship with himself in a healthy way. And I think that, diet was a big part of that, but it encapsulates in so many ways everything that we're talking about, because he didn't have any family, right? He was alone and trying to make ends meet. And one person, he did all the work, but to have me there by his side for an extended period of time, saying, I see you, I validate you, I appreciate and care what you're doing. Maybe try this thing a little bit different too, or just keep going, just keep going. You can really change somebody's life through community. And I think that when you have community, but you have community organized around something positive, whether that's intermittent fasting, whether that's an exercise group, whether that's a yoga class, whether it's a cooking class, whatever it might be, we're social creatures, and being able to look at somebody and say, I see you, I love you, I appreciate you for where you are right now, and just keep going, can change somebody's life. I mean, we don't even have to talk about diet. We don't have to, you just by looking at somebody and saying, I see you and I care about you. And I think, to go back to the point that you were talking about, we're in a world of instant gratification. I could put up a post or whatever and have 10,000 people respond and tell me I'm either good or I'm bad or I'm this or great or, whatever else it might be, but I get instant feedback, and we want an instantaneous result, whatever that result is right now. Well, health can be instantaneous for sure. If you drink too much or eat too much or don't eat enough, you can have an instantaneous effect. But we spend a lot of time with our clients talking about it being like an investment, a financial investment. Any financial advisor worth their salt tells people as young as possible, put money in your retirement. If you put that $1 in your retirement fund at, age 18, 20, 21, whatever it might be, when you're starting to make some money, that $1 is going to be, X thousands of dollars come 20 or 30 or 40 years from now. And, we understand finances in that way, usually because we're exposed to finances at a much younger age. And even lots of families don't talk about finances. People don't like to talk about money. It's a private subject, but the concept of investing in your financial health of the future now is something that's accepted. If you were to apply the exact same thing to health, because that's what we should be doing, what you're eating and the choices that you're making now are going to determine whether you're climbing mountains, metaphorically and realistically, at age 80. So let's start talking about what we eat now, and let's start talking about the lifestyle habits that we're advocating and developing to become part of our personality now. Because you might not see the fact that you eat McDonald's 3 times a week showing up in your overall physiology, your energy, and your performance. But if you continue to do that over time, that might be a very different story. And so in this instant gratification world, health is an investment that we want to make as early as possible. And then we want to continue that journey in a very methodically positive way. And the nice thing is that, again, coming back down, the body has such potential for transformation at every level. And when you choose a new healthy pattern and you do that long enough, it becomes a habit, and that habit becomes part of your personality. And then that becomes part of your character. And then it literally becomes part of who you are. And so no matter where you are right now, you have the possibility of making better choices that will transform your life in positive ways.
I think people don't even realize how small a change you can make that will have that compound interest rolling down the road. And so I've lost probably about 110 pounds. I was about 340 pounds, a little bigger than you. And not all from intermittent fasting, but probably close to 45, 50% of it. And one of the best decisions I made was stop going to drive-throughs. That was it.
There you go. It's like introducing the wolf into Yellowstone. It has huge effects. We've had a client who stopped eating butter, lost 150 pounds because he stopped eating butter.
There's whole books written on it. But if you were going to pick, one thing that most people should be doing or could be doing that would transform their life, it's just as simple as drink more water. You live a lot longer without food than you do without water. So if you're not getting enough water, if you're dehydrated, like I said, there's whole books written on this is the foundation for almost every disease. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. But I do know that you can't live very long without water. So it is critically important. And oftentimes if you just drink more water, boy, that really can change, again, your gut bacteria. It can change your relationship to hunger. It can change all kinds of things. And so, there's little simple things, like you said, that, I'm just going to drink 15 more ounces of water today for the next week or 2 weeks. I'm going to see what that does.
Did you know about Butter Bob? He was a thing a while ago. I don't know. He seemed like some kind of country bumpkin, and he claimed that just by eating like a diet of, I think, a lot of butter, he lost like 150 or 200 pounds. But it's not so much about the butter, it's what didn't go in while he was eating the butter.
Exactly.
This is the whole point, right? And takes us back full circle to the beginning of like, okay, well, somebody made just some outrageous claim about this new health benefit, and they discovered this in 24 mice in a lab, right? Okay, well, he's only eating butter, but if he went from eating 5,000 calories of fast food and now he's only eating 500 calories of butter, well, that's a very different thing, right? But, the overarching part of it is, oh my God, that's not sustainable because he's not getting any nutrients, vitamins, minerals. That's not a sustainable diet, obviously. And so, again, the long-term view is very important.
Yeah. And the number on the scale doesn't mean he's healthy.
Right.
No.
And for how long? It depends on your goals. Some people want to live fast and furious and eat what they want. And, they don't care what happens at the end. And other people do have the goal, and it's like investing. It's like, do you want quick wins, fast money? And, it doesn't matter once you're 30, you're not going to live past 30 anyway. What's it matter? Just enjoy it now. Or are you in it to have these returns on your investment support you into your 80s, 90s, or beyond? So it depends on your investment goals, what strategies are right for you. And that, again, is why no strategy is right for everybody, because we have different goals. We start in a different place. We have different risks. We have different genetics. All of these things factor into the fact that there are strategies and frameworks that can benefit most people. But if you want to make accelerated advances in your health and well-being towards your goals, then it needs to be personalized. Whether that's you and your own research, or whether you choose to work with someone like us who does the research and then guides you what to do and saves that time for you, doesn't matter. But if you want to make faster progress, or you have something that's pressing, like an illness that's pressing and you're concerned about, then you need to do something that is personalized, and can get you where you need to go faster.
And the nice thing is, we're wired for positivity. I have to believe that, at our core, at our soulful level, that we're wired for light and love and doing the right thing. I mean, we get off track, some of us, from time to time, some of us for long periods of time. But I'd like to think when you look at a newborn baby, when they've come out, there's nothing wrong. It's all perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that you said earlier on, and something that Stacy just said right now as well, where, some people want to eat what they want and they want to live fast and furious. Well, it's interesting to look at what you want, because in your example before intermittent fasting, Twizzlers were something that you really wanted. But then you made changes in your life. You took control of your life, and you made proactive changes. And in making those changes and having your cells transform, your gut bacteria transform, your whole being transform literally at every level, you don't like Twizzlers anymore. They taste like lumps of wax. And what you find is, if you start to make some positive choices, small choices, the things that you want that didn't serve you start to fall away. And the things that you do want become things that serve you. And that's how transformation really happens. That's how we go from a darker, negative place to a more positive place. And we usually do that by taking positive steps, not by trying to restrict the things that we've done before. And so everybody has the possibility for transformation. It's just about what choices you're choosing to make right now, and who you're choosing to make them with, because life is a team sport. We're all in this together.
Right. I definitely wouldn't be around or where I am today without the community that supported me throughout my whole adventure. But it goes back to education. Like, our school systems just don't teach us how to make good decisions. It's not, there's not a class on decision making and, looking at the pros and cons and things of that. We don't teach great social skills. We don't teach great problem solving except in math, and, well, when am I ever going to need to use an algebraic equation? And, well, maybe at MIT you had to, but, most of us aren't going to have to.
Hey, looking at scientific articles, there's not a one that doesn't have an equation in it. It's all founded on that. But you're right. We don't learn the basics of how to run our bodies. You can learn, you get a car, you need to change your oil. It comes with, your little schedule of when to change the oil, when to change a timing belt, how often to change a fan belt, get your tires rotated. We don't get one for our bodies. And it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. They used to have home ec, where they'd at least teach you to cook a little bit, old style cooking. But phys ed was usually a horrible experience for most kids.
Yes.
So, they weren't exactly building our toolkit. Yeah. So unfortunately, we're getting close to running out of time again. Yes. So if people wanted to get a hold of you and learn about your suite of services and what you can potentially do for them, how are they going to do that?
So many people are on social media these days, and that may be the easiest way. I am on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, although we spend most of our time on LinkedIn because we tend to work with professionals who are highly motivated to be successful in all areas of their life. So that's the platform we're on. So Stacy Naugle, StacyNaugle. And you can find me across any of those platforms. That's a great way to connect with us, to check out our posts. We often refer back to our blog as well. And so you can learn more about what we do, how we do it. I'm happy to have people DM and, ask a question. It's a joy for us to help empower people to take charge of their health, and to show them some strategies and some frameworks and some ways that they can then use consistently to achieve the kind of life and dreams that they did not think were possible. And it requires transformation. They'll go from who they were, they have to transform into the person they want to be. It's not just about willpower and new habits. And if they are that kind of person who is willing to transform, they're curious, they're open and motivated, absolutely reach out. We'd love to talk with them.
You make an interesting point. Jason Fung, I don't know if you know Jason Fung. Um, he's
Not sure.
a nephrologist in Toronto, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his book name, but he's like one of the gods of intermittent fasting. And he says your hormones will beat willpower 24/7,
Yeah,
365 a year.
yeah.
So,
Willpower gets you going. It doesn't sustain you for long-term results. Our goal for people is a change of life. It is
mhm,
long-term results. Yeah, we might have to prune some branches now to, get
mhm,
you out of a red zone, but the whole goal is healthy longevity. And that does not rely on willpower. That relies
mhm,
on resetting the body system, supporting that central energy and overall optimal health so that you have the highest chance of turning on the right genes. We didn't even talk about epigenetics. Um,
yeah.
you know, of having the longest, healthiest life possible so that you can do the things that you love, do the things that you feel you came here for, that you're passionate about. It's hard to wake up in the morning and have, like the man Bob I told you about who said, how'd this young man get in this old body? It's hard to wake up and go, oh, my soul, my spirit, this is what I want to do today. I want to make a difference, or I want to play with my grandchildren. But you wake up and you get out of bed and your body's not there for it.
Mhm.
That is hard. That is hard on a person's spirit when you have a drive inside you and you don't have the capacity in your physical form to fulfill it. And
Right.
that is something that when we see people transform and they get out of the rickety old car with the flat tire that's out of alignment and their bodies transform into the kind of vehicle that serves them, that is pure joy.
Mhm. In the fasting world, one of the things we try and get people to focus on is the NSVs, the non-scale victories.
Yeah.
And, even something as simple as, you, I was able to get down on the ground and play with the grandkids that I haven't been able to do in, 10 years. Or
Yeah.
I could walk down the aisle in the airplane and I didn't have to get an extender belt for the seat belt. Like
Right. We
those are
have
the measurements we should be looking at more than what's my BMI, which is a totally ridiculous metric.
Yeah, yeah. One of our clients, her primary goal when she started working with us was she said that she gets home from work and her husband will say, hey, you want to go walk to the beach? And she's too tired. She's going to make dinner and that's it. She wasn't helping with her kids' after school activities anymore, or the play, or making food for the basketball team, or walking with her husband. And she wanted those things back. And
Mhm.
within a couple of months, she was going on walks after dinner. She volunteered for her child's play at Christmas. She, she was involved in these things. She said, oh, I have my life back because I now
Mhm.
have the energy for it and the enthusiasm. She had, gotten rid of the old car and had upgraded to the new model. And that's the motivation for sustaining your habits. That's her physiology changing so that she does have that compound interest to carry her forward with momentum. And that's why we do what we do, really.
Yeah. Well, I love your message and I really appreciate you two coming on, and
Thank
especially for
you.
the extended version. I don't usually do shows this long, but this has been great. Lots of good information, and you give such a positive vibe. And I
Thank
think that's something that people can resonate with. So thank you.
Well, thank
And
you. We appreciate your story, and I really appreciate what you're up to. A lot of people. I think it's easy in this world, especially if you turn on the news and you can't even get away from it, to see a lot of things that are challenging, and stories like yours, and the people that you've worked with, and what you've accomplished in really a quick period of time when it comes right down to it, and transforming your life. You're a role model of positivity. You're a role model
Amy,
for how to do the things you should be doing in order to do the things that you want to be doing, right? And that's
thank you.
that's that's uplifting. It's motivational. It's inspirational, and it's been our blessing and our pleasure to co-create with you here now.
Thank you. That's a wrap for today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye bye.
Thank you, Fred.